Hello everyone. So first of all, happy Independence Day to all. So on this occasion, August 15th, so we got independence in 1947. So this is the 76th Independence Day celebration. So almost we completed 76 years, right? So this was a great and a long struggle to got the independence from the Britishers' hands. Okay, so the story of our freedom struggle is very big. Even I can't describe this in one day. Okay, so just I'll try to make all these things and informations to you within half an hour. Okay, so coming to the subject, so almost this struggle was started from 1600 to the 1947. Okay, so East India Company, English East India Company, so this was one of the company in the European continent. So especially the purpose of this company is trading. Okay, so this was formed in 1600. Actually the company was formed in 1600. Okay, so in that particular time, so the queen of the London was Queen Elizabeth, England. Okay, so she was the one of the shareholders of the company. It means she also has the hand in the East India Company. So that's why she given the entire and sole power to the East India Company, especially to trade with East countries. Okay, so 31st December 1600, the royal charter was granted by the Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so it was a royal approval. Royal charter is nothing but it was one of the approval or giving permission to the East India Company, especially for the trading purpose. Okay, so here Dutch company, there were so many companies were started to trade with the East countries. Okay, so one of those companies were Dutch company. So Dutch company were well established. They trade with the Southeast Asia. Okay, so already before East India Company, so there's so many companies would try to trade with India and other countries in Southeast Asia. So Dutch company were well established their factories and their trade and their ports in the Southeast Asia. So that's why in that particular situation, so the English company, it means East India Company, turned to India. Okay, especially the East India Company came to India as traders. So for the materials, those are the textiles, silk and cotton and the spices. Okay, so India is very famous for the spices, cotton. The pure cotton is available in India. So by seeing these important products and materials, these were attracted the East India Company for trading. Okay, so 1608. So East India Company, so it was set up a factory so at the Surat. Okay, Surat is in Gujarat. So the first factory was set up in at Surat in Gujarat. So next 1615 they got the Farman. Farman is a royal edict or royal act. Okay, so especially this Farman was for the trade. So it started to establishing the factories in all parts of the Mughal Empire. So at the end of the Mughal Empire only the East India Company arrived our country. Okay, so the last empire was whenever the Britishers arriving our country was Mughal Empire. So in that particular time, the factories were started to establish in the Mughal Empire only, because Mughal empires given the permission, that is Farman. Okay. So here the Mughal Empire, so it was the richest and longest ruling power in India. Okay, almost the rule was started in 1526 and it was ended in 1858. Okay. So we already know about the Mughals. So they were the Muslims and their origin was Central Asia, and the language, spoken language was the Persian. Okay. Okay, so the main trading settlements of the Portuguese were, so I already said there so many companies were started to trade with India, Portuguese, Dutch and French companies. So Portuguese were well settled in some areas, so those are the settlements. So Cochin, Goa, Daman and Diu. Okay, so these are the very important settlements of the Portuguese company. Okay, so 1612 and to the 1614, so the English defeated the Portuguese company. So because of the competition between the Portuguese and the English company, so the prices of the commodities and materials, raw materials were increasing. So that's why, to get out of the competition from the Portuguese, the English company started to defeating the Portuguese companies. Okay, so finally they got success on the Portuguese companies. Okay, so till 1617, Surat was its center of the trade. So because it was very well developed by the Britishers, so that's why they made the Surat as a center for the trading. Okay, in 1623 it was established factories at different places. Okay, so these are the places: Ahmedabad, Agra, Masulipatam, Broach. So these are the different places where the factories were established by the Britishers. Okay, in 1744 to the 1763, so there was a military struggles between the French company and British East India Company. Okay, so in 1744 to the 1748, the first Carnatic War. So in that particular Carnatic War, the French won the war, and in the second Carnatic War, so 1748 to the 1754, so in this particular war, the Britishers won the war, and in 1756 to 1763, so there was a third Carnatic War. So that was British also succeeded in the third Carnatic War. So it was ended with the peace treaty. So that is the Treaty of Paris. Okay, so in that particular Treaty of Paris, it allowed the French to have their companies and factories in India, but those cannot administer in those factories. Only they have the factories enough, but they don't have any right to the administer of those factories. Okay, so this was the provisions and the features and the consequences of the three Carnatic Wars, and it was punishable for the French company. Okay, in 1717, so the British conquest of Bengal. Okay, so the Farman was granted by the Mughal Emperor Farrukhsiyar. Okay, he was the Mughal Emperor in 1717. So the great privileges were enjoyed by the East India Company because of the Farman granted by the Farrukhsiyar. Okay, so the main important provision of this Farman was without paying taxes. So it enabled them to export and import goods from Bengal. Okay. Excuse me. So here, without paying the taxes also, it can export and import the goods from Bengal, especially within the Bengal region. So this farman was granted by the Farrukhsiyar Mughal emperor. Okay. So, whenever the Mughal Emperor Farrukhsiyar granted the farman or dastaks to the East India Company, so this created a tension between the company and the Nawabs of Bengal. So, actually, there were Nawabs of the Bengal also there, even though the Mughal Emperor Farrukhsiyar granted the great privileges to the East India Company. So, that is without paying taxes, also it can enjoy the export and imports of the goods. So this was created a fear in the minds of the Bengal government because it may lead to the loss of revenue. Okay, so without paying taxes means this always lost to the government. Okay, so here the dastak's power was misused by the officials. Okay, actually the Mughal Emperor Farrukhsiyar given the farman to the East India Company, so that is only for the East India Company, not for the private trade. Okay, so the officials started to misusing of the power which was given by the Farrukhsiyar. So that was they are using with their own private trade. Okay, so that not comes under the East India Company, but the officials also have the other important private trade. Okay, so they are using the dastaks to their private trade. Okay. So next is 1757, the Battle of Plassey. Okay, so the Battle of Plassey was between the Sirajuddaula, he was the Nawab of Bengal. So Sirajuddaula always against the East India Company because without paying taxes, they are exporting and importing the activities. Okay, so that's why Sirajuddaula versus East India Company. Okay, so here next battle was the 1764, the Battle of Buxar. So it was between the East India Company versus the combined forces. So here the combined forces were the Mir Qasim, and he was the Bengal Nawab, and Sujat Dawla, and he was the Awadh Nawab, and Shah Alam II, he was the Mughal Emperor. Okay, so the combined forces and East India Company. Okay. So next is 1765 to 1792, the extension of the British influence, the war with Marathas in South India, okay, in Maharashtra. So Indian Maratha Empire versus the British East India Company. So it was the wars were ended with the Treaty of Salbai in 1782. Okay, so next Mysore Wars, 1767 to 1799. So almost four wars with Mysore and the Britishers versus Mysore rulers. So here the Tippu Sultan was very important, a great ruler in the Mysore. And in 1799, Tippu was defeated by the Britishers. And 1797, two strongest Indian powers, those are the Mysore and Marathas. At the end of the 1797, the two important Indian powers had declined in power. Okay, and in 1798, the Lord Wellesley introduced the policy of a subsidiary alliance. So this was the first important policy which was introduced by the East India Company, which was against the Indian rulers. Okay, so the military protection agreement between East India Company and Indian states. Okay, so the main important purpose of this subsidiary alliance is just each and every Indian ruler, they don't have any military protection. The military protection will be provided by the Britishers only. So this is the main theme of the subsidiary alliance. Okay. So in 1848 to the 1856, the Dalhousie, the policy of annexation. So this is the second policy which always struggled our Indian rulers. So that is the doctrine of lapse. So the adopted sons were not allowed to rule independently. Okay, so here only the own sons have the power to rule the territory of their fathers. So whenever a king or ruler adopted the other sons, whenever they don't have any son, so in that particular time they were never rule a particular territory because of the adoption. Okay, so the doctrine of lapse, which says about the adopted sons were not given the power to rule a territory of their fathers. Okay. So after that, the so many important acts were passed by the British government, that is East India Company. So the Regulating Act of 1773, Pitt's India Act of 1784, 1786 Act, Charter Act of 1793, Charter Act of 1813, Charter Act of 1833, and Charter Act of 1853, and Government of India Act 1858. It means 18. Next. Indian Council Acts of 1861. These are the very important acts which were passed by the British government. Okay. So 1857, the first war of independence, that is 1857 revolt or Sepoys mutiny. So the revolt was begun at Meerut. So it was initiated by the Sepoys in the Bengal, so against the British officials. Okay, so because of the especially during the military training, so there was one thing abused our Indians and Muslim soldiers. So that's why they started movement against the Britishers. So this was the first war of independence. So there were so many wars between Indian rulers and Britishers, but this was considered as the first war of independence because officially we started to movement against the Britishers. Okay. So 1885, so the formation of the INC, Indian National Congress. So at present this was a political party, but in that particular time it was one of the important party, not party, but it was one type of the organization to discuss about all problems of India, especially for the freedom and independence of India. Okay, so in December 1885 it was formed by the A.O. Hume. Okay, so he was the ex-official IC, it means Indian Civil Services officer, and he started to form Indian National Congress just to discuss about the Indian problems. Okay. In 1905, the Swadeshi call. Okay, so Swadeshi movement in Banaras session. The so many sessions were discussed in the Indian National Congress. In Swadeshi movement, it was started the Banaras session of the Indian National Congress. And 1905, 16th October, partition of Bengal. So here the main important policy which was followed by the Britishers was divide and rule. Okay, so first of all they have to divide the country and then they start ruling the country. Okay, so because of the majority of the people, Muslims and Hindus in the West Bengal, it means Bengal, so it started to divide in the East and West Bengals. Okay, so just to decrease the power of between the Hindus and Muslims. Okay, so it was the day of the mourning throughout the Bengal. Okay, so on this occasion, it means on this particular situation, the Rabindranath Tagore, he started celebrating Rakhi Bandhan. Actually, at present we are celebrating the Rakhi Bandhan between the sister and brother. But in that particular time, this practice was started by the Rabindranath Tagore to enhance the brotherhood between Hindus and Muslims. Because in that particular time there was a partition between the Hindus and Muslims, just to decrease the power between Hindus and Muslims. They wanted to divide the country on the basis of the religion. So that's why, to enhance, to promote the brotherhood between the Hindus and Muslims, he started to celebrating Rakhi Bandhan. It means just to tie the thread of the waist of the particular Hindus and Muslims. Okay. So 1906 All Indian Muslim League was set up. Okay, so actually 1885 Indian National Congress was started, and the main important domination of the Indian National Congress was Hindus actually. So whenever it comes to 1906 All India Muslim League, it was one of the political party of Pakistan. Okay, so 1907 Surat split. So actually here within the Indian National Congress, the people were divided into moderates and radicals, extremists. Okay, so because extremism, some people they always with fire, and they always with the curiosity to get the independence. Whenever comes to the moderates, they always very slow in the freedom struggle. So that's why there was a clashes between the moderates and radicals. So that's where extremists, they lost their faith on the moderates. So that's why they divided into moderates and radicals. Okay. So next, 1916 Home Rule League, it means a self-government. So it was started by the Tilak and Annie Besant. Okay. 1915, the Mahatma Gandhi. So he returned from South Africa to India. So from this age, the new national movement was started. So on this occasion of the arrival of the Mahatma Gandhi, there were so many important movements were started. At the end of the 1915, so there's so many movements were started by the Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so first one is the Champaran movement. It was in Bihar, 1917. So almost this was for the peasants. So peasants against the European planters. So because of the forceful cultivation of the indigo, because there was no use for the cultivation of the indigo, because we are always depending on the agriculture for food. So without cultivation of the food, they were forcefully have to cultivate the indigo plants. Okay, so that's why there was a movement against the European planters by the peasants. Okay. Next, Kerala movement, Satyagraha. Okay, 1918, it was in the Gujarat. So, just for the demanding relaxation of the revenue tax. So, because the people, British officials, they have the Diwani rights. Diwani rights is nothing but collecting the taxes from the people. Okay, so whenever they got the Diwani rights, they started to collecting the revenue from the people in the form of tax. So, in a particular country or in a particular territory, there are some rich persons and poor persons also living. Okay, so whenever comes to the poor people, they never pay the tax because of the poverty, because of the poor conditions. Sometimes the farm cultivation also may failure, or crop failure, and because of the some diseases also, the people never pay the tax because of the such conditions. Okay, so this was the Satyagraha and the movement against the revenue revenue officials. Okay, next, Ahmedabad mill strike, 1918. So it was industrial dispute between the owners and workers of a cotton mill. So almost here the people wanted to hike their salaries. Almost 35% they wanted to hike their wages. Okay, and next, Rowlatt Act, 1919. So it was one type of the police custody. So detain any person without any information for a maximum period of 2 years. Okay, if anybody is suspected for the terrorist activities, that person can be jailed in 2 years without any information. Okay, so this was very So cruel provision. Okay, Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Okay, so this was very sad issue for the Indians first time. So Baisakhi Day. So on 13th April 1919. So agriculture festival. Mostly this was also called Vaishakhi. This was performed by the Sikhs, especially during the agriculture cropping system. So patron, so General Dyer, so he was a general Dyer, military general. So he blocked only one entrance to the particular garden, Jallianwala Bagh. So he blocked the entrance and he ordered his troops to open the fire on the unarmed civilians almost in the particular Jallianwala Bagh garden. So all are the civilians only, even though he opened the fire on the civilians. Okay, so almost 379 people were died and 1200 people were injured. Okay. In 1922, the non-cooperation movement was organized by the Mahatma Gandhi. So just to induce the British government of India to grant self-government as Swaraj. Okay. So next to 1925, Communist Party of India was founded. Okay. In 1927, the Simon Commission. So it was a group of 7 members of the British Parliament. So under the chairmanship of the Sir John Simon, just to study the constitutional reforms in administration of India. Okay, so British government so here set up a commission to inquire into the Government of India Act 1990. Okay, so the main important aim of this commission was to inquire into the working of the act and to suggest some other reforms in the system of the administration. Okay, so in 1928 Simon Go Back, this was a slogan. So because of the only the members were included in this Simon Commission were the Britishers, so that's why this was a slogan was raised by the Indians. Okay, 1929 Irwin offer. Okay, so the Viceroy offered the dominion status for India, and he called the round table conference to discuss a future constitution. Okay. In 1929, Indian National Congress passed the Purna Swaraj, so total independence resolution at the Lahore session. Okay, in 1930 to 31, civil disobedience movement was started, and it was a refusal of a citizen to obey certain laws, demands, and orders and commands of the British government. Civil disobedience. Okay, and the next. 1930, so the Salt Satyagraha, so or Dandi March, so 12th March 1930, so almost 200 miles they walked from the Sabarmati Ashramam to the Dandi March. Dandi is a village in the Gujarat sea coast. Okay, so just it was a tax resistance campaign against the British salt monopoly. Okay. In 1931, so Gandhi-Irwin Pact. So it was a political agreement, and it was signed by the Gandhi and Irwin. So peace pact in which both parties agreed the conditions put by the each other. Okay. In 1932 to 34, the civil disobedience resumed. So and it means it was relaunched in 1932. So because of the dissatisfaction with the conference with Britishers, so again Gandhiji was relaunched the movement, and it was ended in the 1934. And in 1932, so the communal award, it means on the basis of their minorities, so the country was divided into the communities, and it was set up the elections for the minorities and the economically disadvantaged groups. So British Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, so it established this type of the communal award. Okay, so this is also known as MacDonald Award also. Okay. In 1932, Pune Pact, so it was agreement between Gandhiji and B.R. Ambedkar. So B.R. Ambedkar on behalf of the Dalits, so he was assigned. Okay. In 1940, so two nation theory was started. So it is a political doctrine, so the division of India into the two independent nations. So this was the concept was propounded by the Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He was the legitimate ruler of Pakistan. So India and Pakistan, two important independent nations. So this was the two nation theory was started and propounded by the Muhammad Ali Jinnah. In 1940, so August offer. So this was announced by the Viceroy Lithgow on August 8th, 1940. just for the expansion of the executive council to include more Indians and recognition of India's right to frame their own constitution. They given some offers, so that's why it was called August offer, because it was announced in August, and they promised to provide the dominion status to India, and they promised to give the independent nation to India. Okay, in 1942, Cripps Commission. Okay, so headed by the Sir Richard Stafford Cripps, just to obtain the Indian cooperation for the British war only. So they given some promises to the India because of the use of World War. Okay. In 1942, Quit India movement, so it was launched by the Gandhi, and the demanding an end to the British rule in India. So this was a large scale effort for independence against the British rule. Okay, it means large people, so even mass people also followed, and they also involved in the Quit India movement. Okay, so in 1943, so Azad Hind Fauj, it is nothing but Indian National Army. So in Singapore, it was formed by the Subhash Chandra Bose, Azad Ka Hind Fauj. So gave is famous called Delhi Chalo. Okay, so he formed and he created and he maintained one army against the Britishers in the Singapore. Okay, in 1945, Wavell Plain and Shimla Conference. So Lord Wavell, he was the viceroy, and he started negotiating on the new constitution for India. So once the Second World War completed, so they will give the permission. Okay, so and it also provided a separate representation on the basis of the communal lines. Okay, in 1945 September 19, so this was an announcement, that is Clement Attlee, he was the prime minister of the Britain. So Labour government came into force in the England, so that's why the PM also changed. Okay, so he announced on September 19th, so central and provisional legislatures elections. Okay, in 1945 to 46, elections, general elections were started in Central Legislative Assembly, and the same way Council of States also. So here the INC emerged as the largest party out of one or two seats. It got the 57 seats. And Muslim League won all Muslim constituencies, but it was failed to win other seats in other areas. Okay. In 1946, the cabinet mission to discuss about the transfer of power from the Britain to the British government to the Indian political leadership. So just it was has the aim, so that is preserving India's unity and granting its independence. So all about the independence. About the independence of India, so that was included in the cabinet mission. Okay, in 1946, the Constituent Assembly met for the first time. So the actual Constituent Assembly was formed in 1946. On the basis of the cabinet mission plan only, we started to forming a one Constituent Assembly, especially for writing the constitution to rule the country. Okay, in 1947 February 20, so Prime Minister of United Kingdom Clement Attlee announced the British government, just the British government would grant full self-government to the British India by the June 30, 1948. Okay, so he said only the June 30, 1948 only the India will get the independence. He announced the date of the independence of India. Okay. So Clement Attlee appointed the Lord Mountbatten as the viceroy of the British government. Okay, in 1947, Lord Mountbatten, and he announced in May 1947 that provinces so were to be declared independent successor states with the power of choosing whether they join the Constituent Assembly or not. So it was the choice for the independent provinces. Okay, in 1947, the independence and the partition, so change of political borders, so two independent dominions, India and Pakistan. So 14th August 1947, Pakistan got independence, and 15th August 1947, India got independence. Okay, so the border line separated India from Pakistan is known as Radcliffe Line. Okay, so this is all about the history between 1600 to the 1947. So this is the long struggle. So this is the brief notes for the Indian history regarding the freedom. So total, whenever we got independence in that particular time, the princely states were 562. So actually, whenever they are leaving our country, they given one important permission for the princely states, that is whether they join with Pakistan or India. So this is the chance for the princely states. So 562 princely states were in the Indian subcontinent. So almost it means 559 princely states were accepted the instrument of accession and they joined with India. So without any war or without any important features, but they truly and easily they adopted the Indian culture and Indian government. And three were very dangerous in that particular time. So those are the Jammu and Kashmir, Hyderabad, and Junagadh. Okay, so Jammu and Kashmir, it was concluded and included in India with important military, and 27th October 1947, and Hyderabad 18th September 1948 it was combined into India, and Junagadh February 1948. Okay, so these were the very princely states, and because of the Muslim domination or Muslim ruler, only three were very struggled against the India. So finally, so Sardar Vallabhai Patel, so he actively participated in the integration of the princely states. Okay. So 1947 to 1949, so the whole process of integration is in the hands of the Sardar Vallabhai Patel. So that was because to cherish that particular person, there was a statue of unity in India. So it was the world's largest statue. So height of the particular statue is 182 meters, and it was constructed in the Gujarat. So just it is a tribute to the Iron Man of India, that is Sardar Vallabhai Patel. Okay, so he was responsible for uniting all the 562 whole princely states of the country to build a Republic of India, and he given the it means shape to India. So to include all the princely states into the India through the so many struggles, through the so many military traits. Okay, so so this is all about the history regarding the independence movement from 1600 to the 1947. Just this was a brief notes. So okay, thank you.